Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Fuhrman. Welcome to Vox Novus, the new voice. In my 50s, I would often experience being awakened from a deep and sound sleep by excruciating pain in my calves. My wife suggested I try these tiny white pills, 2 or 3 placed under the tongue, that she found to be effective in relieving and preventing these cramps. I tried them, and they worked. On the label was printed the word homeopathic. This was my introduction to homeopathy, and later she introduced me to other remedies, including Arnica Montana for bruises and other muscle spasms. Each of these treatments, for me, proved to be safe and effective. They were also inexpensive, did not require a prescription, and were readily available at our local health food store. If these remedies were this good, why were they not prescribed and recommended by physicians? Furthermore, why did media try to dismiss the benefits of homeopathy and accept the word of skeptics without looking at the scientific data? My guest this week on Vox Novus, Ananda Moore, asks these same questions. Ananda began as a skeptic of homeopathy until a profoundly transformational experience while backpacking through India and experiencing homeopathy for herself. She always knew that she wanted to dedicate her life to helping others, and instead of going to law school, she decided to pursue homeopathy as a career. Ananda graduated from the Ontario College of Homeopathic Medicine in 2005, went on to study around the world with some of the most highly recognized homeopaths, and became co-owner of Riverdale Homeopathy, a clinic, bookstore, dispensary, and general hub for everything homeopathic in North America. She served on the Council for the Homeopathic Regulatory Body of Ontario, as well as the board of the Ontario Homeopathic Association. Her path also took her on another journey, a quest to find out why so many questioned the efficacy of homeopathy. Using her wonderful storytelling and theatrical background, she produced and directed a breathtaking and moving film of this journey. The film is called Magic Pills, Homeopathy, Promise or Placebo. Please join me in welcoming to Vox Novus, Ananda Moore. Welcome, Ananda.
Hi, Victor. Thanks so much for having me on the show. I think that's one of the best introductions I've ever had.
Well, thank you very much. And you deserve it because, as I shared with you offline before we began, this film really moved me. It takes a lot for a documentary, which this is, to move me, but this is more than a documentary. This is a message that you traveled the world to collect. So please share with our listeners your path and what caused your early skepticism with homeopathy.
Yeah, well, I was actually quite interested in different types of spiritual matters and healing, fascinated with the idea of things like Reiki and different things like that. But after a course I had done in university on witchcraft and the occult, where they taught us about homeopathy, I think that tells you a lot, that in a course on the occult, they brought up homeopathy. I left relatively convinced that people were completely brainwashed into thinking something like this could work. So if people don't know out there listening, for homeopathy, we actually dilute a substance way beyond the point where, according to standard chemistry, there should be any of that substance left in that solution that we give to people as medicine. It goes way beyond Avogadro's number. So it becomes very curious as to how something like this can have such an effect on people. And I was completely bought into that perspective until several years later, I was backpacking in India. I was in a place called Pune, and I woke up feeling very ill. And I was traveling with this lovely German girl whose mother was a homeopath and had equipped her daughter with this very extensive homeopathic kit. She picked out a few sugar pellets for me, passed them on, and I accepted them with much skepticism. I just wanted to prove to her that there was no way these things could make a difference. And I was shocked when a few minutes later I started very rapidly to feel better. And within half an hour, I was up and eating, and my energy was back to normal. And I was completely shocked. And that's when I decided maybe it was worth a second look. And I went to see a homeopath for further treatment.
Now, you had mentioned Avogadro's number. I know what that is, but for our listeners who don't, please explain what that means.
So it's a law of chemistry. It's a number that states, it has many applications, but one of them, which relates to us, is the point at which you're not going to have any of the molecules of a substance after continued dilution. So with homeopathy, we do a sequential dilution. We put 1 drop of a substance into a solution with 99 drops of water. We shake it up. And then we take 1 drop from that vial, put it into the next vial, add 99 drops of water, shake it up. And that could be done 6 times. It could be done 1,000 times. So at a first look, it doesn't seem to logically have any possibility of doing anything. But through further investigation, we've learned that we now have nanoparticles in very high potencies, very high dilutions. And we also think of it as an energy medicine. There's something else happening that's beyond the chemical reaction that we see in pharmaceutical medicine.
Absolutely. You had mentioned the fact that the number of dilutions, and for those who are familiar with homeopathic remedies, when you look on the bottle or the package, it'll say 6x or 4x or whatever the dilutions may be. Those are the number of dilutions, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So an X means that it's been diluted by a factor of 10. So that's 1 drop of remedy to 9 drops of water. And the C means to a value of 100. So 1 drop of medicine to 99 drops of water.
And you had mentioned nanoparticles. Nanotechnology is something that has come to the fore in the last 10 or 15 years with the advent of the practical applications of quantum physics. But from what you're talking about, it's like a tiny, 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 tiny fragment of the original substance, right?
Exactly. And so in my film, I visit Dr. Jayesh Ballare, who is a chemical engineer. And he has specialized in nanomedicine, actually, in the applications of nanotechnology in medicine. And someone approached him and asked him, hey, what if you looked at a homeopathic remedy under your electron microscope and let's see what happens? And he took up the challenge and said, sure, why not? He's one of the few people in the world who has constant access to an electron microscope. So it was very easy for him to do. And when he did this, and now it's been replicated in dozens of laboratories around the world, but when he first did this, he used a remedy made from gold, aurum, and he was able to identify gold nanoparticles in dilutions as high as 1 which is that dilution by a factor of 100 done 1,000 times. So it almost sounds preposterous, but we have the pictures and are replicated. This has been replicated everywhere, so it's clearly there.
This is fascinating to me as someone who's been involved in science and also spirituality for all these years. This is really fascinating to me. Now, most of our listeners are familiar with homeopathic remedies, but perhaps not the history and the concept, as you mentioned, behind it. How was it initially developed?
So it's actually based on older forms of medicine, and people like Hippocrates came up with the idea, or wrote about the idea rather, that like cures like. And this is a basic tenet of homeopathy, meaning that something that causes a set of symptoms in a healthy person will help cure or treat those symptoms in a sick person. So an example could be coffee, or, we think of coffee as something that stops you from sleeping, can give you insomnia. So maybe someone who isn't able to sleep can use homeopathic coffee to allow them to fall asleep. And that's like cures like. And then around 200 years ago, there was a man named Samuel Hahnemann in Germany who was a physician. We use the term allopathic physician. And he was very distraught with the treatments of his time. He felt that he was making people sicker rather than helping them. And he actually quit his medical practice because of this. And he started translating texts instead to make a living. At one point, he was commissioned to translate a text on how cinchona bark, which is the bark of a Peruvian tree, was very useful in the treatment of malaria. And this cinchona bark is where we now derive quinine from and all the anti-malarial medications that are used, including hydroxychloroquine, which we hear a lot about now in relation to COVID. But in those days, this text claimed that he thought this bark was effective because of its astringent qualities. And Hahnemann questioned that. He thought there were many other things that were astringent and had no effect on the treatment of malaria. So he decided to take the bark himself and see what would happen. And to his surprise, he started getting malaria symptoms. And that is where he first postulated the idea that like cures like, but I really believe that was based on all the reading and studying he had done through his work. And that's where his journey into homeopathy began. So he ended up in traveling a lot of Europe, having many students. We had homeopathic pharmacies around the continent, and he eventually ended up in Paris and died there. But homeopathy became very, very popular, and at many points even more popular than what today is considered conventional medicine.
When you say that like cures like, when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, there was an old expression, the hair of the dog that bit you. In essence, that's what we're talking about.
Right. So that refers, I think of that, the hair of the dog is the hangover treatment of
That's
having
correct.
a drink in the morning.
Alcohol
I didn't
treating
know where that came from.
Alcohol treating a hangover, but not that. Obviously, we don't want to do that, but we're talking about the same kind of basic concept that a particle of the substance which can cause the disease can also cure it, is what we're saying.
Correct.
Okay.
And that exact, when we say the exact same thing that caused the disease will cure it, we don't refer to that as homeopathy. We refer to that as isopathy. But when it's something that's very similar, then we refer to it as homeopathy. And I'm just saying this because some people get very nitpicky about their terminology, and I've gotten in trouble for equating the two in the past.
Why do you think that most of allopathic medicine has dismissed, up to this point, homeopathy?
There are many reasons. One, I think in Hahnemann's time when he started, he struggled a lot with the pharmaceuticals, with the pharmacies at the time. And eventually he suggested to other homeopaths to not use the pharmacies and to actually make their own remedies, because he felt that they weren't making the remedies up to standard. And this caused a huge rift, which was never really healed, between pharmacies and the homeopathic practitioners. So I think that kind of lay a foundation for the struggles that we saw moving forward. But, I tend to think of the pharmaceutical industry and a lot of the medical industrial complex as very easily threatened when something comes along that could impact their profits.
So in essence, what we're talking about is the old concept that we're talking about the business of medicine or the medicine of business.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
There are a couple of terms used in conjunction with the skepticism: confirmation bias and placebo effect. For those who may not be familiar with these, please explain them.
Confirmation bias is once you've exposed to a certain ideology or belief, you tend to only see and recognize the information that confirms that belief. And you tend to ignore the information that doesn't confirm your belief. And beyond that, there's even an effect where if you see information that disconfirms or that goes against what you believe, you'll actually feel like you're being tricked, and it will actually confirm your belief even more strongly, which is very interesting. But that, I think, is a very common obstacle that all of us come across, especially when confronted with new information.
And placebo effect.
And placebo. So placebo, that's a very big topic. But from a very generalized perspective, it's almost the belief that your mind can affect your symptomatology. So if you are given a pill and told that it's going to help you, regardless of what's in it, it could be what we call a placebo, so just a blank sugar pill with nothing in it, then, and you take it and you feel better, we call that placebo. But placebo is so much more than that, and it may be linked to quantum entanglement. We find that even when people know they're taking a placebo, they may feel better. We've found differences in a placebo group if they're given a shot versus a pill versus a liquid versus different colors of pills. But placebo has become very important in how we test medicines and how we test a lot of things in science. But it creates a control group so that we can see whether the effect of healing is caused by this quote-unquote mind over body, or if it's actually the medication having an effect.
Now, is the placebo effect also tested in homeopathic remedies?
So we do have placebo-controlled trials. There's, I think, over 1,200 of them in the literature. But it's not necessarily how we practice in day-to-day life. Obviously, we're trying to get people better. There are practitioners who do use placebo. It's very popular in places like India, where they feel that people want to have the impression that they're taking something regularly, because sometimes a homeopathic remedy only needs to be taken once in a week or once in a month, or so to give people the impression that they're doing something proactively, they're given placebo. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, you did. That was fine. And just talking a little bit more about this concept of the mind over matter, the placebo effect, I have personally experienced situations where people, just in the process of receiving what they believe to be energy healing, whether it was truly energy healing or not, and this was tested in a hospital setting, got better. And so not taking away anything from homeopathy per se, but the power of the mind over the body is very, very strong, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And from a homeopathic perspective, we look at it all together for sure, because for my personal belief is that our body holds the traumas of our mind and vice versa. And sometimes even when our mind starts to feel better, our body can still hold on to that. And it takes really deep work to get to it. But we know that the mind can change our body chemistry, can help release different hormones in the body, can increase or decrease inflammation. I think it's silly for us to separate them and think of them as separate beings.
Absolutely. I just actually interviewed a doctor recently who was a spine surgeon and found that spine surgery was not correcting the chronic pain that his patients were suffering, actually gave up his surgical practice and started looking into it because he himself was experiencing chronic pain, and found that he could control that chronic pain with a series of exercises and mind techniques, which he has then in turn given to his patients. And people who suffered long-term chronic pain are now finally pain-free without medication, without surgery.
Mm-hmm. And we also experience what we call the consultative effect, which is just the process of coming to a homeopath and having that really in-depth consultation. Often my initial visits with a patient take 2 hours. So they have the opportunity to be really heard and also to examine and understand where their stresses are coming from and the links between their illness and what was going on in their life at the time. All those things, I think, really guide a person towards healing. And the homeopathy facilitates that even further.
Absolutely. And God bless you for doing that, because I can't tell you how many physicians I've visited over the years who would spend no more than 5 minutes to assay what's going on and then either write a prescription, send you for a test or a procedure without really hearing what you're experiencing. So thank you for doing what you do.
Well, I can't imagine any other way. So
Absolutely. It's about helping people, not hurting people. My guest is Ananda Moore. She's the producer, director, the star, the creator of Magic Pills, Homeopathy, Promise, or Placebo. Ananda, please tell our listeners where they can see this film and find out more about you and your wonderful work.
The film is available at watch.magicpillsmovie.com. So it's pills with an S. It's also available in North America on Amazon Prime and around the world on iTunes and Google Play. I think maybe even Hulu, but I'm not, my distributor has taken care of that stuff, so I'm not fully clear. But it's very easy to get wherever you are. Shortly, within the next few days, we'll be releasing DVDs as well.
Wonderful. And your website?
RiverdaleHomeopathy.com.
And we'll be back with more of Ananda Moore after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization. Their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers, pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Look out, world, we're getting strong. The future's here and we belong. She can STEM, she can do more. Like build a rocket and watch it soar. Or clean the oceans and make the world a better place. Oh, she can STEM, so can you. Find a cure, invent something new. There's no challenge in the world that she can't face. She can STEM.
Learn more at She Can STEM. A message brought to you by the Ad Council.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
Man, I love my kids so much. I once sat for 3 hours in the cold rain to watch her soccer team lose by 18 goals.
I love my kids so much, I once used a tube to suck snot out of her stuffed nose at 3 a.m.
You win.
Love your kids? Love them enough to make sure they're in the right car seat. From toddlers to tweens, visit nhtsa.gov/the right seat to find the right seat for their age and size. Keep them safe. Visit nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Ananda Moore. We're talking about her film Magic Pills, Homeopathy, Promise or Placebo. What inspired Magic Pills and the journey that it entailed?
I attended a homeopathic conference here in Toronto where an immunologist from Cuba, from a pharmaceutical company that makes vaccines in Cuba, presented how they stopped an epidemic in only 2.5 weeks using homeopathic remedies. Now, I'd like to add this is the one pharmacy in the world that makes the vaccine for this specific disease for people. And this disease is called leptospirosis. It's a bacteria that's very problematic in tropical countries and can have a fatality rate of 10% or more. And he presented this information and told us about how the medical journals, for the first time in his career, refused to publish his information, and he was shocked. And to me, it felt like such an important point that the world, had this been done with a standard vaccine, that in 2 weeks an epidemic was stopped and that the rates of this disease never returned to normal. They actually went below historical rates, that this was done with almost no adverse reactions, no need for cold chain transportation, and it could be done for less than 5 cents a dose, very affordably. This would be front page news. And yet, no one would ever know that this had happened outside the homeopathic community. So it felt very important for me to find a way to get the story to more people. And that was how the process really started. And I reached out to Dr. Gustavo Bracho, who's the immunologist in Cuba, and he gave me permission to come and film and learn about everything they were doing, and it just opened my whole world. So that's really where it started.
Let's talk a little bit more about Cuba and leptospirosis. Tell us what that infection is, how it started, the conditions that bring it about, and what his work entailed.
So leptospirosis is a bacteria, a spirochete, which is transmitted through standing water. So if someone walks through that water and they have the smallest abrasion on the skin, one that they're not even aware they have, they can become infected. And it becomes very prominent when there are hurricanes, as you can imagine. And Cuba is very prone to hurricanes. So in 2007, a very strong hurricane hit the east coast of Cuba, and 3 provinces were very strongly affected. And it was incredible because we went and spoke to the people there, and they showed us pictures. They showed us how all the vegetation had disappeared. The paint was stripped off the buildings. Buildings were destroyed. And when you're in that situation, there's no possibility of avoiding the water. It's up to your knees everywhere you go. And before this hurricane hit, they were already having an increased incidence of leptospirosis, and now they knew that they had a potential epidemic on their hands as the rates started to increase dramatically. Now, the Finley Institute, which makes the vaccine, didn't have enough vaccine for the population. And it actually takes several months for that vaccine to take effect. They didn't have that kind of time. And so, having heard about homeopathy and started doing a little bit of research into it, they decided to try something dramatic, make a homeopathic remedy from the spirochete itself that they were able to isolate. And within a matter of weeks, they had doses of this remedy out to millions of people. So it was quite incredible because the rates of the disease went below historical levels very quickly. And then the following year, the entire island was hit by 3 very strong hurricanes. It was one of the worst years on record. And this created a control group inadvertently. So the rest of the island that didn't receive the intervention had an increase of about 25%, if I recall, of the disease. And the part of the island, the 3 provinces that were intervened, actually had more than an 80% reduction, despite this year having very similar phenomena happening across the island.
And the World Health Organization raised their hands to the sky and said, "Eureka, this is wonderful," right? No.
We only wish. Cuba offered to help with the Haiti when they were hit with the earthquake. And what was it? Was it an earthquake? Yes. They experienced so much destruction and an epidemic of cholera. And Cuba offered to come in at their own expense and do a homeoprophylaxis program, and they were denied.
In your film, you featured confirmed skeptics as well as medical doctors, practitioners, and patients in the film. What motivated you to take this balanced approach?
I didn't want to make a propaganda film. This wasn't a film for people who already believe and use and love homeopathy. I wanted to talk to the people that have been mostly exposed to that mainstream narrative that homeopathy is completely unscientific. And I wanted to show that we had heard both sides of the story, that we weren't ignorant to the arguments against homeopathy, but rather that they were very shallow and didn't examine the depth of the material available, the research, the medical and scientific evidence, as well as the real world use. These massive interventions like we just spoke about in Cuba. There's been similar ones in India that affected hundreds of millions of people. And I wanted to give the viewer the opportunity to decide for themselves and to go, maybe I don't know everything there is to know, and I'm open to doing more research and looking at this further. That was my goal, because I think if you hit someone too hard with a one-sided perspective, one, it feels really biased, and two, we're undervaluing the intelligence of our audience, I think.
Absolutely. Why do you think, just in your energetic reception with the people that you interviewed, the skeptics that you interviewed, you can present them with detailed studies and peer-reviewed studies that prove the efficacy of many of these wonderful homeopathic treatments? Why won't they even listen to those or even look at them?
It's really interesting. When I interviewed Joe Schwartz in Montreal, and I talked to him about these studies, he just denied that they were even possible. It was that really powerful confirmation bias. Nope, homeopathy can't work, so there is no way that was possible. It must have been something else. And it's like a wall. I think when you're such a materialist, your entire foundation of how the world works lays on that one level. And if you have to believe something that doesn't fit that model, then you're destroying the ground under a person's feet. So I think it's very hard for them to be able to change their perspective easily.
But when allopathic doctors take the Hippocratic Oath, they say that they will do no harm. Isn't it a way to dismiss studies that prove the efficacy of the treatment, a way of doing harm?
I would agree with that, absolutely. And I think that a lot of our allopathic treatments often do more harm than good. We can talk about iatrogenic injuries and deaths, which is one of the major causes of death in the United States. And that's death caused by the correct use of drugs and surgery. The failure rate is, I think, quite high. And even if they're working, the side effects they create can often be worse than what the disease they're treating. It feels to me like a very aggressive way to work with the human body, and one that's more profit-based than humanitarian. I saw an article, I think I shared it online yesterday or the day before, that talked about how these new genetic medicines and genetic models of treating people may not be great for the pocketbooks of the pharmaceutical industry, and that they may be putting themselves out of business by curing people rather than helping treat them on a chronic basis.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to dismiss the work of Big Pharma, because Big Pharma has produced some wonderful things. And I think what we're talking about is not just dismissing allopathic, but a junction between allopathic and homeopathic, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, and I think other forms of medicine as well. There is so much to be taken from so many different modalities and thousands of years of learning that we've discarded. In India, the homeopathic hospitals have both an allopath and a homeopath at the head of every department. so they can work together. If someone needs surgery, they need surgery. And then homeopathy can be an incredible adjunct at helping them heal. There's a right time for each thing. I'm very grateful for antibiotics, but we've used them in an incorrect manner and caused so many problems. There are so many forms of medicine that are very life-saving, and I'm grateful for, but we need to be more integrative, I think.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some of those specific parts in magic pills. You talked about India. You visited the Banerjee Clinic, which was an eye-opener for me, because they explained there's a tragic cancer rate in India, a country where you would think this would not be. How did you find this, and how were these being answered with?
The Banerjee protocols. Yeah, so I met the Banerjees at a different conference, and was astounded by their work and really excited to go visit them, particularly because they don't practice classical homeopathy, which is, that 2-hour appointment. They've over, seeing tens and hundreds of thousands of patients come to these very specific protocols, so they don't need to spend as much time with a patient. But what's fascinating is I think they're having the most success with the brain tumor treatment. And brain tumors, particularly glioblastomas, have a very, very low treatment rate or cure rate in Western medicine. And it's almost a death sentence usually. And if that doesn't kill you, the treatments, the radiation to the brain, the chemotherapy, those treatments can be so severe. I know people who've suffered permanent brain injury from those allopathic treatments. And they developed a course of 2 homeopathic remedies. And I got to see firsthand how many people have improved. They have like an 80% success rate. And this doesn't mean that everyone is 100% healed, but often the body will completely separate that cancer from the body. The tumors don't grow. And around 60% of the time, if I remember my numbers correctly, the tumors do actually shrink and reduce in size. So, and they have the data to prove it. They see about 1,000 people in their clinic every day. It's astounding. And instead of doing more research and looking at these options, we ridicule publicly and defund all this kind of work.
In the film you shared, have they proved the protocols in a petri dish? Please explain.
Yeah, so a doctor from, I'm forgetting the university right now in the States, he decided to see what was going on, and he put tumor cells in a petri dish, added the ruta and calcphos, which are the 2 remedies, and saw how the tumor cells were actually destroyed while the healthy cells around the tumors weren't touched. So we can even see this in vitro in a petri dish. We don't need to just look at patients to get the data. At the MD Anderson Cancer Clinic, that's where he's from.
Absolutely. So there was scientific backing of this protocol.
Yes.
That's amazing. Is anybody practicing this protocol in the States?
I'm sure there are. They've trained people all over the world.
And again, so you have this protocol established and proved in India, backed up by MD Anderson, and what did the allopathic scientific community say?
Oh, it's just been ignored completely.
Unbelievable. Is that because cancer is big business?
Well, I think I heard a statistic that the average cancer patient makes the system $500,000. I'm sure that's grown since I heard that statistic, but yeah, it's big business. They don't want to cure. They don't want an easy cure.
That's so horrible. How can we live in a society that would allow that to happen? I don't understand.
Yeah, it's something I can't wrap my head around, and it took me a long time to recognize that this was actually happening, that it wasn't the well-being of people that was at the frontmost of our medical system's minds.
My guest is Ananda Moore. She's the creator of an amazing film called Magic Pills. We'll be back with more of Ananda after these words on the OMTimes radio network.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
America, your children have an amazing superpower. They can help save lives by not having play dates. That's right. By replacing get-togethers with virtual play dates and video chats, they can help slow the evil spread of germs. And if your superheroes do go outside, make sure they continue their superhero wing by staying 6 feet away from others to protect everyone in America land. Find out more at coronavirus.gov. A message from the CDC and the Ad Council.
I'm Kathy Williams, host of Sexy Mom Abundant Life radio show on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. On the show, we explore living abundantly in every area of your life. Ways to let go of limiting patterns and beliefs and to step into the flow of creativity and possibility, knowing you are supported by the universe.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living, a chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me, and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
Know that feeling? Like every door is closing and you just can't see a way out? Being unemployed, underemployed, or just out of school feels a lot like that. But when you find the right tools, suddenly everything just clicks. Getting on that path may be easier than you think. A good place to start? Go to findsomethingnew.org. At findsomethingnew.org, you have access to resources that help develop new skills. Skills that will position you for careers in today's growing industries, from healthcare and manufacturing to cybersecurity and alternative energy. Plus, you can take advantage of online courses, certification programs, apprenticeships, and more. So you can take yourself from unemployed and uncertain to empowered and prepared for what's next. Find your path to a new career today. Visit findsomethingnew.org. A message from the Ad Council.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week, Ananda Moore, we're talking about her film Magic Pills, Homeopathy, Promise, or Placebo. In addition to talking about India and Cuba in your film, you also showed an amazing piece from Kilimanjaro region of Tanzania, exploring a dedicated young couple bringing homeopathy to poor people, not young couple, but a dedicated couple bringing homeopathy to the poor people there that were struggling with almost endemic HIV/AIDS. Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, it's Jeremy and Camilla Scher, who I'm sure will appreciate being called a young couple. And Jeremy was originally from South Africa, and he's one of our great teachers in homeopathy, very well respected. And when he started having success in working with HIV patients in his practice, he wanted to take that back to Africa. And so after much research and deliberation, they chose to go to Tanzania, depending on how you pronounce that, where you're from. And they moved their entire family there to start this project, Homeopathy for Health in Africa. And what's really beautiful is that they found themselves working with a lot of women. and a lot of AIDS widows. And the story of these women is just so traumatically sad. What happens is that their husbands will die of AIDS, and their families and their communities actually blame it on the women and say that the wife gave the husband AIDS. They then completely ostracize the woman and her children, and often these women are left to fend for themselves with few skills and now feeling very ill from HIV. And a lot of these women make their way to homeopathy for health in Africa. And what's been incredible is these women are able to get their energy back, get back to work, and raise their families. So they go into communities all over the country. They go to places where there's almost no access to any other kind of medical care. And, you know, Jeremy used to tell me he has very, very high success rates, close to 100%. And I just really didn't believe him until I went to see it for myself. When I sat there in those clinics and saw person after person after person coming in, showing us that they were so much better. I saw, it's in the film, this one man who had Kaposi sarcoma all over his legs, and it was all gone. His skin was smooth. There were, you know, discolorations from where the lesions had been, but there was nothing there. Just person after person who was so grateful. And they got their lives back. And obviously it's not 100% of people. We actually, 2 cases that I saw where people hadn't improved was where they had been given medication for amoebas, which was very powerful medication and seemed to antidote the homeopathic medicine. Now, Jeremy and Camilla don't take their patients off of the antiretroviral medications that they're on, but the limitations in Africa, or in a lot of Africa, are that they don't have that many levels or types of medications available, lines, that's the correct term. What happens in other countries is that someone with HIV is put on a line of retrovirals, antiretrovirals, and when those stop working, they're put onto another one and another one. So there are a lot of options for them to continue treatment, where in a country like Tanzania, there really is only one line of medications available to people, and they eventually become immune to that medication. And what Camilla and Jeremy were able to do was to actually extend the life of those drugs, so that even once there was medication failure, they were able to bring people back. And the way they measure it as well is by looking at the CD4 count, which are the immune cells, the white blood cells that are measured to see how the immune system is doing relative to the HIV or AIDS infection. So
and that segment in the film was so moving to me, and to see these dedicated people doing this work for those people in Tanzania is just absolutely amazing. Let me ask you, is homeopathy addressing the COVID-19 pandemic?
We are. We're very cautious about how we talk about it. The FDA has decided that no one can discuss any natural method of treating or helping people with their immunity with COVID-19. But countries like India implemented homeoprophylaxis programs. Cuba did as well. And we have groups all over the world that have set up hotlines for patients to call to get advice on homeopathic remedies that can help address their state. You can tell I'm being very careful with the language I use there.
Absolutely.
And we have several scientists who set up databases to record how we're treating people, what remedies are working, what aren't, and to see at what stage of disease of COVID-19 infection are people at, and how are they recovering, so that we actually have the data to look back onto, because we have that kind of data from the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. And homeopaths were extraordinarily successful in treating the Spanish flu, and we have that data from the homeopathic hospitals of the day, from the homeopathic physicians that worked for the military. And we had extremely high survival rates relative to conventional treatment. We have a great article on that written by Andre Sain on my website if people want to check it out on magicpillsmovie.com. But there's so much data that hundreds of thousands of cases of people treated with homeopathy in that time. And we're hoping to be able to collate that same kind of data now and moving forward with COVID-19.
As you share, homeopathy is seriously threatened globally and urgently threatened in the USA. What's happening?
Several years ago, the FDA came out with a draft guidance document that basically stated that homeopathy had to go through the new drug application program. Now, the FDA was actually sponsored by a U.S. senator that was a homeopath. And the beginning of the FDA was very homeopathy friendly, and they grandfathered homeopathy in. But we know homeopathy is non-toxic and really holds no imminent danger to anybody. And the role of the FDA was to be able to qualify how much danger are we willing to risk with a medication versus the benefit to that person and how to manage that. So it almost doesn't apply to homeopathy, but industry has become very wary of homeopathy, and it's really an attempt to shut it down. If you look at the cost to get one medication through that new drug application program, it can be up to $300 million. And they're also, the studies are very much about symptom related to a drug or a disease related to a drug, where homeopathy has so much of an individualization process that needs to take place to prescribe accurately, that kind of research doesn't ascribe well to homeopathy. So one is we don't have, our pharmacies are very small. They have, it's $1 billion industry in the U.S., but how many remedies can we get passed for that kind of money? It's not a lot. And what they're really doing here is intending to reduce access to homeopathy in a significant manner in the United States.
Would it be exaggerating to call the work of all of the dedicated homeopaths in your film heroic?
I don't think so. I think a lot of these people have really stuck out their necks, given up a lot in their lives in order to do the work they're doing. But I don't mean to take you back. I just want to say that there is a group that has come up in the United States called Americans for Homeopathy Choice. And they are currently addressing and have been in conversations with the FDA and now have a citizens petition and a letter writing campaign. And we need people to write those letters and sign those petitions. And they can go to homeopathychoice.org. And it'll walk them through how to do that in only 2 minutes. So I want to encourage your listeners to help save access to homeopathy and be heard by the FDA.
In my opinion, your film and your making of it is heroic. Do you feel that you've gotten your message across?
I would like to reach a wider audience. We have reached tens of thousands of people with the film, and I know many people have said that it's made a difference. But we need to reach a lot more people. I think more people need to be aware of what homeopathy is and know that it's an option available. And we're at a point in time right now, historically, where we could lose this beautiful modality. And we need people to know about it and to know how significant it can change people's lives. So, Victor, you're part of that in helping me spread this message.
Thank you. What's next for Ananda Moore?
I am working on some new projects. Seeing patients, putting a new course together on homeopathy, and I'm working on a platform, which is right now a little bit hush-hush, but it's to provide education on natural medicine to people.
That's wonderful. When you have that ready, would you please come back and join us?
Absolutely, I would love to.
My guest, Ananda Moore, she's the creator of the film Magic Pills, Homeopathy, Promise, or Placebo. Ananda, one more time, please tell our listeners where they can catch your film and learn more about this wonderful work that you do.
So you can visit magicpillsmovie.com and you can screen the film there, or it's on Amazon Prime, Google Plus, and iTunes. And we were going to have DVDs available in the next week or two if anyone's interested in that. And so the website was magicpillsmovie.com. And if they're interested in learning more about homeopathy and my work, they can visit riverdalehomeopathy.com.
Ananda, thank you so much for this very important, and as I said in our introduction, very moving film. It moved me. I had tears in my eyes, especially when I was watching the segments on Tanzania. And thank you for bringing this message to the world.
Thank you so much, Victor.
And thank you for joining us on Vox Novus. I'm Victor, the Voice Fuhrman. Have a wonderful week.